the slave cabin that's here now, to me is a testament to the people who lived in them.
I think there were probably two things. It was, their home where they slept every night, where they cooked their meals, where they had their family, but then it was also, a prison cell for them. They were trapped there. It wasn't a place that they chose to be.
We don't know how they lived, and there's a lot of myth and mystery around that as well, that people have the wrong information as to how slaves actually lived in Missouri.
Missouri's Little Dixie region is a beautiful 17-county area of rolling hills, fertile farmland, and miles of river. In the 1800s, Southern farmers came here to build new communities and put down roots. And that made Little Dixie a lot like the Upper South when it came to politics and economy and religion and overall lifestyle. And that lifestyle included tens of thousands of slaves. And here in Little Dixie, a part of that history still stands. About 130 slave cabins built over a century and a half ago remain today.
I think there were probably two things. It was, their home where they slept every night, where they cooked their meals, where they had their family, where they had to try to build a life, but then it was also, a prison cell for them. They were trapped there. It wasn't a place that they chose to be, but it was a place that they had to kind of make the best of what they had and try to build some sort of life in these quarters.
Portia Moran thought she was just researching for a Missouri Life magazine article when she spent the night in a slave cabin as part of that research. What she discovered is more than just a history story.
When you're just learning about it in school or, watching movies or whatever, it's not as easy to maybe put yourself in that position and kind of think like, this could have been me and what would it have been like if this had been my life.
The majority of the research has gone to the big house and the white family. What we haven't done as of yet, and even in the Deep South, it's still the same. It's pretty much the same way, that we need to document those people or African American people that helped to build the big house and help create the lifestyle that these people were living in. And so to not document the housing that they lived in, we don't know how they lived. And there's a lot of myth and mystery around that as well, that people have the wrong information as to how slaves actually lived in Missouri.
For instance, it's easy to forget that after the day's work was done, it really wasn't done.
A lot of their food was supplemented either through the gardens that they grew near their house, their individual cabins, as well as the meat would come from either the lakes and ponds or wildlife around the plantation. They were allowed to catch rabbits and other animals to have that protein source.
And what was used as the dining room was also the family room and a very crowded bedroom.
It could be anywhere from around 4 to 5 slaves up to as many as 10 slaves in one individual room. I've documented that in some areas where the hemp was a main culture, you could have as many as 20 slaves in a room. You would have maybe a trundle bed or a rope bed like we have in this room, but a majority of the slaves probably would have slept on what was called a pallet, which is basically a rolled up blanket, sort of like a sleeping bag in many ways. So at least that way, during the daytime, they could roll all of those pallets up and put them away and then bring them out at night.
Being in that place and seeing firsthand the conditions and kind of walking into that history allows you to see it beyond just numbers and kind of feel it a little bit more. And I think when you can kind of step into it like that, it makes you feel for it a little bit more and realize that it's not so far removed from your current situation, and that just a span of 160 years or so, you could have possibly been in that same situation.
The presence of slavery in Little Dixie even impacted the architecture of the buildings. Here at the Crestmead Plantation, this room, called an observatory, was actually built on top of the home in order to allow the owners to look out the windows and keep an eye on the slave cabins, and also to look out on the fields to make sure the workers were getting the job done. Just a short drive down the road from the Crestmead Plantation is what's now called the Burwood Plantation. Vicki McCarroll owns that property, and she welcomes visitors who want to learn about the slave quarters on it and the lives lived in them.
We need people in future generations not to forget what happened. That we need them to know about slavery. And I also think that the slave cabin that's here now, to me, is a testament to the people who lived in them. It is about the people. Thinking about when I go out there and I think, there were people who lived there, and there are people who loved and died and were sick and went there after a long day's work to see their loved ones. You know, yeah, it's all about the people.
Now, to put things in perspective, at one point, Henry Ruby Walker II owned all this land. He took a trip to Africa and he came back with an orangutan as an exotic pet. He built Jacko the orangutan a 2-room log home, while at the same time, several slaves lived in each of these rooms.
Well, I think that the reason that the history of the people and the history of the whole slavery institution and that kind of thing is very important, because if people don't know that it occurred, they don't know that it can happen again, and it's still happening in our world. And so I think it's very important that we have these structures that remind people that slavery was alive and well in this part of the country.
And that's why it was called Missouri's Slave Belt. Today, it's where caretakers of the past keep our history within reach.
People love to travel. You hear about people going to South Carolina or Georgia or down to Louisiana to see the plantations. And the thing is you can come to a place like this in Missouri and find out about plantation life, as well as what it was like for slaves to live in this area.
These buildings are still here, that memory is still here, the legacy of that still lives on. So to just try to preserve that history and just keep it with you, and just try to learn from the things that have happened in the past and try to make the future better.